So first, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And this territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship. I also want to pay homage to our African ancestors who have laid the foundation for us so that we could go on and continue this work of love. Michelle already introduced who I am, principal at Auburn Drive High School, grounded within my community of the Preston area. I love working with children, I love knowledge, and I do come from an Afrocentric approach. Today, my title is called An Approach to Afrocentric Learning. And in the corner there, the right-hand corner, you see the Sankofa bird. I would like to begin here because the Sankofa bird was designed by our first cohort class in 2018. And you see that it resembles puzzles. And these puzzles, they connect to each other. But within the puzzle, I should go back to the Sankofa bird means to go back and retrieve. So in order for us to go forward, we must know our path. It comes from the Akan tribe in Ghana. And here we look at the information in terms of who the children are. So the community for the children were community, loyal, family, and resilient. They are the ones who decided what would resonate with them. Within the Sankofa bird, you also see the mathematical symbols, subtraction, addition, division, and multiplications. And so each one of these mathematical symbols represent who they are, which is their basic foundation of math, and then the community. Also, as part of this, the Sankofa bird here, it's a mythic bird, and in terms of the peak going back and grabbing, and the students believe that this is the one that centers them. The concept of Africentricity comes from Malefi Asante, and he believes in grounding. It's purposeful. It's a symbol that makes sure that students are part of their own history and legacy. So one of the things that we believe as a cohort is that it's a collective type of energy, and it's a collective privilege, and that we come together to examine the hurt that have taken place in the past, but also the history and the importance of history of what can be done in the future. The approach to Afrocentricity, I'm going to begin with of learning within Ngozi Saba principle, which are 7 of them. And here we talk, they come from Malana Karenga, and I'm going to go through each one of the principle. The first one beginning with unity. Yamoja, meaning unity, Afrocentricity. Centering, we want to debunk the myth that children of African descent do not like math or cannot learn math. And so what we believe that children can learn math by centering them and giving them a sense of purpose and destiny based on who they are. So the facts and experience come from their history. Afrocentricity is based on, it's a transformative agent. So we're transforming the information that we present to students. And then we make sure that they have an understanding of who they are. As teachers, we also transform the information based on our beliefs and attitudes and behavior. And we begin to value the history of the students, coming from a center and grounding them in their own social realities. And the identity piece is very important because if students know who they are and understand, then they become more engaged in the information. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to center everyone in their history, and that becomes positive for not just the African Nova Scotian, but also for other students. Kujijakalia, which is self-determination. In order to go forward, we need to build character. And this is what we try to do within the Africentric Cohort. We look at self-identity, we look at how are they feeling. So creating a self-confidence and self-esteem, and self-awareness of who they are, their identity. Throughout the whole purpose of the cohort is to make sure that they understand their own legacy and their own history. And so we try to build on those experiences. So understanding and growth, trying to maximize who they are, maximize their potential. And here you see that the students learn together. It's a hub of who they are. And they work together in a community, they're engaging, they motivate each other. Students and teachers and parents are part of that community. They're integral into the development of their success. But how do you change the trajectory among African Nova Scotian students? You have to change the conversation and address a critical racial achievement and instructional gap that does exist. You have to expand the knowledge and give the students the opportunity to learn about their own selves. You need to give students agency. And you can do this by scaffolding the work that supports student success, the positive teacher interactions, and connecting students to their information. You value how everyone learns. UGMA, which talks about collective work. And here, the students, teachers, and community are part of that collective work. And they become important to the work that they do. They are integral, like I said before, in the work. We also talk about the connection and the interaction. And the community is not just the community within the school, but the community where the home community, as well as the students, make up this community. The parents become part of the community. It becomes foster in the teacher who's part of the team. So when we look at the next slide, just to give you a sense of the timeline and the process, we had to build a team, those teachers who were interested in being part of the research. So there was a group of us, along with myself and another teacher who's no longer with us, who, when you walk down the hallways, we said that, who do you see in the classes? Who makes up the academic and the pre-cal mathematics classrooms? And our students weren't mostly there, meaning African Nova Scotia students. So we start to look at how can we reframe this conversation? How can we change the outlook? And so the research team started to look at other possibilities. So we examined the Afrocentric schools within Toronto, and we said, why don't we try to do a cohort within our school? So you can see from 2016 to the actual inaugural date, which was 2018. It took us 2 years because we had to make sure that we work with the teachers, we work with the students, we made sure that everybody was on the page and that we were giving out the same information. We did some development and conceptualizing what this would look like. Making sure that we reach out to possible parents, we reached out to our feeder schools to talk about the concept and what we were trying to create. And then we met with our RED to get approval to go forward. We took the students as well away, and I'll show that pictures in the next slide. And then we also spoke to our school advisory council so they were on page and understood, just in case somebody came to them and said, what is this that you're creating, this Africentric cohort? Is this going against the norm or the practice? And actually, when they start to understand it, they could see that it was something that was good for all our students. And one of the things that we do within the summer for the cohort, anyone who comes into the cohort, we're into our third one, they take part in the Summer Institute, which we do before school actually starts so that students could ground themselves, develop those bonding relationships, because we talk about student-teachers relationship, but also student-student relationship, students, parents, teachers relationship. So we've had Summer Institute both years. We're actually going to do a one this year as well, very small, given our COVID-19 restrictions, but we are going to do something where we're going to social distance and provide students with information so that when they come to the cohort and when they go to school, that they feel a sense of ownership. Here, as part of our training for the Summer Institute, I mentioned to you that we did research and we took the students to the Black Brilliance Conference in Toronto. And this was eye-opening for the students because they could actually begin to see, what is culture? What do you mean by, when I spoke to you the first slide about identities and centering, what does that look like? And so we want them to understand their strong, rich, unique African Nova Scotian culture that they have. And so that's where you see us getting ready for the Black Brilliance Conference every year. And we try to tell them that they are brilliant students. They just don't know their gifts and talents. But that's what we need to do as teachers, is to try to get that from them and get them to understand their gifts and their strengths. In the next picture that you see here to the right is a group of students there, and they were thinking about their own intellectual resources, coming together, just feeling so proud of themselves and their history. And these bonding activities are very important. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. So this is who we are, trying to make sense of math, but also how do you take theory and bring it to practice. And so we go to the collective economics, UJAMA. We've got to have partnerships within the community because communities are important. They're interwoven. They view our culture correctiveness and the psychological identity that exists for our students, for our children, that we cannot take the home and the community out of the classroom or out of the school. And so we make sure that we make reference and we value the input of these partners, and we try to mobilize and recognize everything that they bring to the table. Imhotep is a community-based organization that we align with, and we make sure that students understand who Imhotep was, the father of mathematics, and the work that they can do in terms of mentoring, providing that additional support. And then again, we collaborate with the university. We do outings, we do culture trips, mentorships. So if there's something that we cannot build within the school, we make sure that we have the opportunity to collaborate with outside agencies. And so that we, again, anything that we do within the classroom, we try to make sure that we build on it. And so the university has partnered with us, the housing, the Department of Mathematics and Statistics, as well as Imhotep is located on the Halsey's campus, and we work with them. So these are some of the groups that we actually partner with besides our parents, making sure that they're constantly informed. The big one here is purpose, and the student development is changing. How do we prepare our students to be innovators, critical thinkers, problem solvers, researchers, technologists, could have helped me this morning, scientists, and so forth? How do we get them to see their brilliance and your uniqueness? So we got to center the students. This is the whole purpose of the Africentric Cohort. Changing the narrative, creating their stories, allowing them to take information that they've learned before and to bring it to the forefront. Addressing the systemic barriers, rather than pushing them out, how do we bring them in? How do we lift them up as they go along? How do we encourage them to continue on? How do we just say to them, keep trying? We emphasize unity. If you want to do math on the floor, we allow them to do it on the floor. If they want to do it as a group, they do it as a group. As in peers, we allow for the conversation. And from the conversation, you can see that they were coming together. And within the conversation, they develop some of their own unity. They develop their own leaders. They develop their own partners. And always fostering excellence. The expectation is that they can do. Not in a sense that they can't do math. Yes, you can do math. You were born to do math. It's just that something along the way got lost. And maybe it's the self-confidence, the self-esteem, but bringing it back to that whole purpose. And so the next one, I'm just going to show you a little bit about when we foster excellence, we also get them to commit to extra time, making sure that they come for extra help, they come for mentorship, support. We have mentors that come to the school, after school support, as well as lunchtime. And so here I have a few examples that I can show you. Could you say, how does this all work? You say Afrocentric math. What does this look like? Well, here when you look at this picture, you see that there's different patterns, numbers and mathematical. You look at base 10s, hieroglyphics. You talk about the stories of Harriet Tubman and how long it took for her, how many trips did she take. These patterns become part of our stories. We have here Edith Clayton. She did these baskets. How the work that she did is interwoven and interconnected in terms of our story. So we align that lived experience, even though she's passed, but still the lived history of Edith Clayton in terms of basket weaving and the patterns that were developed. And the other thing that you could also do is people use patterns. During the times of slavery, when people were trying to get away, they developed quilts. And in the quilts were stories, and the stories told information. And you use the squares and the mathematical concepts to develop that story. The African theorem, the African origin of the Pythagorean theorem, you can talk about those relationships, the real relationships, and you find out measurements. And then you look at the pyramids of Giza, this connection in terms of Egypt to Africa. And you talk to the students about triangle structures and build on some of that information. And this is all within the grade 10 curriculum. And this beautiful picture here, we live in Halifax, and to see, a picture of the citadel. And so within the citadel, you talk about the stories of Maroons, and you can do so much with the fortification about the Maroons and who they were, enslaved Africans, how they were brought here. Talk about the language, you talk about history, not just within history or English, but you talk about this within math. You got to do a little bit more, but it's critical information just to ground the students in terms of their lived history. So that community of the Maroons and more, the refortification of Citadel, the settlement, the winters, the leaders and who they are, and looking at information and just aligning with that information. And you can talk about common factors. We did a assignment called Factoring Inspection with the whole fortification of the Maroons and Harriet Tubman. We did a assignment called Financial Literacy and aligning students with looking at currency and how it develops throughout the world. What is factoring, which I just mentioned just now in terms of working towards that, rectangles, what are the factors that would give us this area? So that was part of our assignment. And then the one about financial literacy, we looked at currency. This is a group of Blacks within Portugal. Some students didn't even know that there were Blacks in Portugal, just that sometimes they say, are there Blacks in Nova Scotia? Yes, there are Blacks in Nova Scotia when you go to USA. But we did Ghana, we did Brazil, we did Mexico, and we look at the different currency. And then it became a group project. They want to learn more, and then they presented their findings. And that leads me nicely into the next slide, which is creativity. This year, the students, the second cohort, had the opportunity to do the DOOR project, which stands for the Digital Oral History Restorative Project. And the students came up with their own idea. And I'm not sure if you can see the picture that's inserted within the circle there, but that was their conception of the DOOR project to them. The DOOR project was focusing on the stories, not stories, but the history of the Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children and what took place. And so from that history, the students could actually understand that they drove past that community, they drove past that location, and they didn't even know that was the home, Nova Scotia Home for Colored Children, and trying to understand what took place. So in the bottom of the picture there, they developed these tentacles or the roots, and in there was harm, things that took place that harmed them. That was part of that. That became part of the social justice conversation that they had within their class. It came cross-curricular. They talked about it within social studies. They actually led it because they came up with the whole concept. So they talked about the abuse, the harm, the rape, the why did the government leave them there and not take care of them? They developed their own pedagogy of that project. They became the democratic leaders. And their roles and responsibilities and the relationship between the teachers and students changed, where the students were the ones who were coming up with the lessons and saying, can we do this? Can we talk about this? How does this relate? How can we change this? How can we make sure this never happens again? So they were established the classroom community. They became the role models. They start to see the bigger pictures and the purpose, and they start to understand a little bit more about their connection to mathematics as well as to the lived history. And they start to influence themselves, and they refocus on their growth. And then there was expecting more of who they were, and they didn't settle. They were willing to learn, and they're willing to challenge their own beliefs, their own assumption, and to say, even today, moving forward, can you make sure that we continue to be in the same class next year? Please do not put us in a different class. We are willing to do the work, to come for the extra help, to go for lunch hour, to give up time because it's a buy-in. Understanding that, yes, math is hard. Yes, it's rigor work. Yes, we can do it. But as a group, as a communal, we can do this. So this is where the creativity came in, and taking the time to think a little bit more outside the box about what math lessons would be. And this year, we actually did within the grade 11s, we looked at concept of inequalities, and we took the map, or actually the flags of Africa, and we did a lesson. And every class wanted to do the lesson, not just the cohort, but every math class wanted to take part because they were having fun. They were enjoying it. Math became fun. It became less of a task, which they know that it was leading to a test, but we got away from the traditional textbook questions. It became a little bit more in terms of how do we change the lessons? How do we make it more grounded in their own history? And so we start to see that. Within the last principle, which I'm going to talk about, is Imani. And Imani talks about the faith. Actually, if I can, before I go, well, I'll talk about this one first and then talk a little bit what I want to say as well. And I know within schools where you're not supposed to really talk about spirituality, but you do, because it's part of most of us in terms of we believe in something greater than us, something that keeps us going. When things get tough, who do you turn to? So either you turn to your students, your staff, your community, which remember within the community is also your parents, and then the belief in excellence. Within this, you create those spaces for voices that have been marginalized and been silenced to speak up. And you allow them to speak up and to tell their truth. You allowed them to question the power imbalances. You allowed them to go back and say, you know what, I'm going to stick with it. Yes, it's a little bit work. And yes, the reason why I'm taking this math as opposed to the lower math, yes, I may want to be with my friends, but also I'm capable of doing it. So you start to see them changing that whole outlook of that they can do it. And the other thing is that you see them pushing each other and nurturing each other. And that's all part of faith. You don't see nurturing in that sense, but it is part of it when you nurture it. You then begin to deconstruct those beliefs and those culture neutral understanding, universal understanding of mathematics. And then you start to look at social justice, and then you integrate relevant lived experience, issues, identity within there. And then become more responsive. The pedagogy, you begin to change it because you as a teacher as well, you start to have faith and you start to feel confident, and that, you know, you say that it takes a little bit of time, but it's, I can do this. It's possible to foster this communal learning. And then there's this openness to thinking and problem solving and going back if you don't know. And sometimes as mathematicians or math teachers, you know, we put up some barriers and walls ourselves and say, no, we can't redo this again. Why not? If we haven't mastered something, why can't we reteach? And I know we have so many outcomes to do, but we have to really rethink how we do it. So that goes back to changing, having faith in terms of the belief in excellence in both changing the classroom, teachers being critical, conscious about what they do, and then they become the advocates and allow students to advocate for themselves. And then you see levels of activism taking place because students then, they know when teachers are buying in and actually going above and beyond, and they know when teachers are not. And that becomes part of the reality. And then becomes a safe space, not just for them, but for everyone. So that Imani one, in terms of faith and purpose, they're crucial in terms of Afrocentric cohort and grounding individuals. So an Afrocentric approach. So how do we mitigate this work in our present system? How do we act in a way that we see students and that we're in the best interest for them, working together for the same goals and the ideas, the way that we think? How do we realize that the mission and the restoring that wisdom and bringing in those voices, the positive voices, and looking at the information and taking math and making it central to the students? Teachers have to have that faith within their students and the progress that they can learn, the higher level math, and that they can stick with it. So what we have to do is begin to decentralize mathematics. We have to teach in a way that we racialize the work that we do, and that students no longer run away from math, but want to be in the math class and see it as being valuable when they look at all the different aspects of how math impacts their life. And yes, there's going to be some negotiation and the dynamics, but we must recognize our own biases that we have within math. And you maybe will have to give up what is important. And we learned to do a little bit of that this year with the virtual learning. When we could not get through all those outcomes, we had to realign ourselves and say, what is important? What do they really need to know? So it's time now for us to consume. But how must we do this? And we may have to give up a little bit of time. And it won't be easy. We cannot always do what is convenience, which sometimes we can, but we have to create that balance. How do you create that balance amongst the traditional and the social justice? There needs to be a new resurgence and energy among the students. And when you see the energy, when you see students are happy and they want to learn and they become taking the leadership role of their students and want to be together to learn in a community, then you begin to see that you can change the practice and reshape what math will look like within the classroom. When you value how students learn and you navigate their own social realities and identities, and then you begin to rehumanize and make it more relevant. Our students belong in the higher levels of math and those AP classes or IB classes. This year, for the first year, we had 7 students who took AP classes compared to any other year, and that was AP World History. In terms of pre-cal, we had 5 students who went on to take pre-cal, and all of our students went on to continue within the academic stream of mathematics. So they see the importance of representation. How do we constitute and the evidence of equity and inequity? How do we collect that evidence? How do we continue to center our student? It's still there. We have to disrupt the way math is being taught and delivered, and we need to create that shared language and understandings. And just before I end, I just want to say one last thing is that this little African proverb when the music changes, so does the dance. So what it means is that when students stop learning and stop engaging and stop being motivated and being hungry for the information, we need to start reevaluating our pedagogy and looking at what we can do differently. Okay, I hope I got the message across to everyone.
Yes, did anybody have any questions that they wanted to put up in the chat? I really liked how you had mentioned about how we kind of, during quarantine, we really reevaluated what we were teaching and what was important. And I found that to be really an important message, that we have to focus on what is important for our students.
True. Yeah, you're absolutely correct.
So if you just...
The question that we...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I'll let you finish. You were going to ask something else because I was just going to build on something you said.
I just that there was a comment from Melina Kennedy just saying that it was an amazing presentation, and thank you for taking the time to share with us. And Melissa Downey also said wonderful presentation and that she loved your last quote.
No problem. Thank you. I think that when I, as administrator, and Michelle mentioned that, a principal, and the reality within our schools is that we don't have enough teachers who may look like me. But the reality of it is that we have to make sure that we present information that reflect the students that sit in front of us. And we have the greatest impact amongst our students. And I think that is impossible. That is possible now to scaffold those instructions for our students to make them mathematical students, so they can create their own math biographies and their own mathematical understanding. And we need to bring in this community, and we need to bring in the social aspects of what we do within the students. And just like we did, we come up with different lessons for grade 10s, grade 11s, and working on the grade 12s, because our first cohort is now going into grade 12 and working with the teachers. And that means that maybe old starters might need to come in. I'm at the school, so I actually go in, and sometimes I will do some of the lessons and work with the teachers. It's a team approach that everyone is working together to see the success for every person that's there. And that just allows the students to have the opportunity to think and practice and share their own experience, and to look about how relevant this is in terms of math, because that's always the concept that students feel that they really cannot, they can't do it. But if we say that about reading, we don't give up on them. We keep pushing them through, and we keep working with them until they begin to understand those reading concepts. It's the same with mathematical concepts, that we continue to work with them so that they understand, and we keep working so that they build on their prior knowledge and their information. And they start to say it, and they build on each other. They become their community. And that's what the Africentric post is. The real Africentric principles is really centering, understanding. It goes away from those traditional ways of doing and making the students the agents, the change agents, transforming the way we think and do.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Hi, it's Melina.
Hi, Melina.
Thank you so much. I know I put it in the chat, but I just wanted to say thank you again. I share your story all the time about all the hard work that you're doing. And one of the things that people say or ask me is, I'm not Karen Hudson. I don't have those same connections. So what would you say to someone who is relatively new to a school, who is looking at building something bigger than what's currently in their school? What would you say that, where should they start, I guess?
I think they have to look at their school culture and look at, if this is the first time for them being there, is to have conversation with the staff who is there, administrators, their school advisory council, and maybe bring in those elders from the community and take a tour of the areas and see who is in my neighborhood, because we always forget about the people in our neighborhood, and we forget about how we can bring them into our communities. In the Aboriginal community, they have elders. On the African Nova Scotian community, they have elders. In the European community, you have elders. We all have wisdom, individuals who have life wisdom. And they have informal information that sometimes we don't value within our formal settings. And the informal information actually is the one that pushes sometimes students to continue on with the work that they're doing within the formal setting. It's what keeps them grounded. It keeps them going. So even though they may say, I'm not Karen Hudson, I don't have those connections, you can build those connections, but you have to be open to building connections and going further. So you have to do the groundwork. That's the same thing for us. It didn't come naturally. We had to build those connections. We had to do the research. We had to start off, like I showed you the timeline, we had to start off with the timeline in terms of making sure staff and community, because we had to educate before we could say we're going to do this Afrocentric approach. We had to make sure that students understood where we were going, what we were doing, and the community what we were doing, because we didn't want to get a pushback. And yes, everybody was going to say, and some people did say, oh, you're creating segregation. We never used that word at all. People came to us and say, we've never said that within any communication that we use. We always talk about principles of Afrocentricity and centering and grounding our students in their information, their history, not taking away, but building them up so that they could understand. So they have to do the research. They have to see who's in their neighborhood, who's in their community school, who's in the community where these children come from, how do they get here, what do they need, what are they lacking, and do that whole research piece. If they were doing research within the community on information dealing with water, they would still have to do research. It's the same thing. They have to make sure they do the groundwork before they just say, oh, this is something that I want to implement. And then they have to make sure that their teachers understand what you're doing and that they support it. They support that the work that you're doing. So it's not just you, because otherwise then it's in a silo. But it means the whole school, the whole team is part of it. And it's always constant conversation. And then when others see it, you have to keep bringing them on board. And so we keep on expanding. This year, I'm so excited. We have a teacher of African descent who's going to teach our English as part of the cohort. And so this is something that we keep on building on the vision, building on the action, because math is action-based. It shouldn't be all textbook, it's action-based. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. There was
Perfectly, thank you. So I just put, if there are teachers or educators who reach out and are looking to help support by developing questions or resources, how would you say that they could help?
If there's teachers or educators who want to reach out to help, I would say that what they could do is meet with the team, because you have to have a team that's going to be the ones who are going to be steering the process, and then talk to them and to see what are some of your ideas, because they can become part of the team. So rather than just saying, oh, I'll do this, whatever, maybe they could come and observe and see how the classroom is in action, or during after school, at lunchtime, even on the weekends. Sometimes we meet, we have math jam sessions, English sessions where we work with the students, whatever the students, because it's led by the students. If they say we need this, then we make sure we have it. So I would get that teacher to observe and speak with somebody who is part of the team, and then talk about some of their ideas, and then say, you know what, I'm interested in being part of it. And the other thing that we also did is that we share a couple of our lessons with the grade 10 classes, with the teachers, with the regular classes. And there was only one student out of all those classes that we had, and there may have been about 7 classes that time who was doing the lessons at the same time. There was one student who didn't understand, that was pushing back out of all the students. One who couldn't really see it, but everyone else thought, why can we do more of this? Why could we change what we do in terms of our practice? So by observing teachers and other teachers, you could begin to do some of that co-teaching and then see how you can fit into the bigger picture of what we're trying to do. It's if I can say this point to Michelle, is that you have to believe in it. You really have to believe in it. It just can't be an add-on. It has to be ingrained within your whole philosophy of how you teach and how it's rolled out to other students and parents and community. And parents have to be integral to the process. You have to update them. So we do meetings with them, conversations with them. Before any group comes in or any cohort begins, we actually meet with all those parents. And this year, this is our 3rd group that's coming. We had in February, 24 parents that came out for a meeting. And, you know, I was shocked because you're thinking that they're going to come out, and the teachers, as part of the team, they come up so they can see the team. And we talked about to them. We say, we're talking about African Nova Scotian. This program is for African Nova Scotian. We are going to focus on African Nova Scotians. We're going to focus on their lived experience. And we're going to make sure that they understand the importance of who they are. And we try to begin with the Sankofa and continue on right into present day. And this year we had all kind of ideas that we were going to do with the street checks, because that was our next social justice issue that we were taking, that whole information that was produced by the Wortley report, and how we were going to use that information to create conversation within math and history and English, and even within their sciences class, and definitely within the art. And so the parents had the opportunity from that first meeting to say if this is something that they believed in that community approach, the communal working together, that the students have each other's back. And everyone that came to the meeting signed off and said, yes, if I'm chosen, please, I want to be part of it. My child will sign off and know that they have to give so many hours in terms of volunteer hours, because we do the mentorship program with the Nelson Winder. We try to work with them. I'm not sure how it worked this year, but we started that last year. And then going out and having some real life experience with some business organizations, but then at the same time, keeping up with their responsibility as students. So they know that they're responsible for any time they go out, that you're responsible for your work and for the information. So we are making them accountable for their own actions as well. And from the people that we reach when we go out is different ideas that we want to change. When we went to the math program, we wanted to develop an African game based on what they had saw, the information, and using the same math concepts. So yeah, it's that whole buy-in from teachers, from the community, from the parents, from the students. They make that whole process work in terms of the Afrocentric approach. Thank you, absolutely. Thank you for everyone who came on.